We are live. Ooh. So I am live right now with Chad Anderson and from Beyond the Loan, and we were just talking about the fact that you started in broadcasting, sports broadcasting specifically, and you mentioned great with football, American football, of course, my favorite
Yes.
sport. Well, my second favorite sport. I'm a huge UFC fan, but American football, basketball, all the kind of. What about baseball?
Baseball, yes.
Yeah, hell
Baseball is
yeah.
actually my favorite sport. I think it's the best game, just with all the
Really?
strategy and things that go into it. I love baseball the most as a sport, but in America, American football is the best atmosphere.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense because baseball is very, very long, isn't it? It's the equivalent, let's say, of cricket in the UK.
It's the
It's a
same
long.
length. It's the
Okay,
same length of game, but there's just more dead time.
sure.
There's just a lot more dead time during that 3 hours compared to a football game.
So you mentioned when you did it, you also did some sort of some smaller sports like soccer, which I hear
Yeah.
is big in some countries, and netball and such. How do you commentate or broadcast or on a sport you don't know? Like, if baseball's your
Yeah.
favorite, but you're now sat at a netball tournament or a soccer tournament, how do you broadcast and commentate on that?
Well, a lot of it is you watch games that you never thought you would watch. I mean, you're sitting there watching tapes, or this is 15 years ago, so you didn't have the internet the way it is today, where you could just pull up any game, any match, anytime you
Sure.
want,
And you
and
could be
have
an
everything
expert,
at your fingertips.
in an hour's time after watching 10 shows. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Believe it or not, we were getting DVDs.
Yeah,
Remember those?
I do.
Putting those in the Blu-ray player, putting them in, watching the game on TV, and just kind of learning and listening to the broadcaster. You also just screw up a lot,
Okay.
and the goal is you screw up once and just make sure you don't make the mistake again. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. So I
I
think it's more if you just own it and don't hide it and
mm.
fix it the next time, then people respect it.
When I was about 11 or 12, I started playing guitar. And my dad found me not necessarily guitar teachers, but just great performers. So people who couldn't potentially teach very well, but were just awesome. And he'd be like, "Hey, here's money. Teach my kid once a week." And one of those guys that taught me was a guy called Gary Brewer, who was like a local blues legend. And he
Yeah.
always told me, if you make a mistake, you got to make it again. Right? You can't stop and be like, "Oh, sorry, I made a mistake." But what you want to do
Right.
is just make that mistake again in four, give it 4 bars, just do that same ugly note again, and everyone goes, "Ooh, we meant it. Oh, we meant it." So okay,
Just
so
play it off. Yeah.
yeah, just keep going. Exactly. I'm gonna do it again in another 4 bars.
That's awesome.
So,
Hilarious.
so we've kind of got into a little bit, but you've changed the sort of. You were going live every day. How long did you go live every day for?
I don't even have the exact episode count. It was probably 6 months.
Whoa!
So, yeah, somewhere in there. We started in March or April, and we just had a baby a month ago, and we basically went up until we had the baby. And
Wow.
at that point, that's when obviously I took some time off. We had things going on here at the house, and we had
Same.
already decided that after the baby came, we were going to revamp a little bit.
Cool.
And so that's what we did is we just kind of slowed it down. We felt like it was white noise. Like it was
Mm.
just every day, hard to keep up with, hard to keep track of, and it's just a lot.
And hard to
And
promote as
it was,
well. Like, I find
yeah.
we do these live shows every 2 weeks, and we're
Mhm.
still playing catch up a lot of time to make sure that we've actually, maximized this long show and walked away with lots of pieces of content, which I know is something you do for
Yep.
your show as well. But we struggle even to make sure that's on time, and we don't even release promos for a month. I can't
Yeah.
imagine the workload to try and stay on top of a daily shows. And also, even if you're going 5 days a week on a 20-day month, it's sort of 20 days a month. That means you did like 120 live shows.
It was
Yeah.
something like that, something crazy. Yeah, Becca, who's my assistant and producer, she's an absolute monster and just destroyed it. She really did. She took the project and ran with it because yes, it was a ton of work. There were times I would wake up and we'd go on at 2 o'clock, like you are right now in the
Yeah.
UK, and it would be 1:50, and I'm like, what am I talking about today? Like you're just kind of looking around, like, what is today? What am I talking about? And there were some shows where it was just ad lib for 10
Mm.
minutes or 15 minutes.
You
Because
must
yeah,
have
it's just
been
a ton.
so good, though. You must have been so a month or so in. You must have been like at the top of your game. I always say to people, like, it takes a while to get good at interviewing, or well, not even interviewing, but like having an open form conversation like this, which is broadcast live. It's not, the conversations I have with my friends in a pub or in a pub garden right now. Aren't entertaining necessarily. Maybe over a few hours we have a great time, but if you condense down
Yeah.
what we said over half an hour, it's not. So you must have been firing on all synapses to be able to do that.
Well, part of my background was the sports play by play, but I also hosted sports talk shows.
Hmm.
So I was used to interviewing people.
Right.
And then there are people I listen to who have podcasts, like when I go for a jog,
Sure.
and I enjoy the podcast for the content, but I also am listening to them and their art and how
Hmm.
they do it because some are really good at it and some suck at it. And there are some that, some literally have a following just because of who they are, but they
Mm.
suck at what they do. And they're trying this podcast thing for the first time, but they suck at it. But yeah, so I would like when I'm listening to it, I'm not just listening to answers to
Mm.
questions. I'm listening to how they do it.
Mm. I spent when I first ever even heard about podcasting. My co-founder of the company had already started a show which I didn't know about, and he had to do something and was like, "Hey, can you host this podcast?" And I was like, "What's a podcast?" And I spent that week just listening to different podcasts. Now, unfortunately, I've always been a huge Kevin Smith fan. And I suddenly found that he did podcasting. So basically, I just learned in that week to say really dirty jokes. Um, and that's what, and then for about 7 months or like probably over that, probably a year of doing a podcast after that, I was just the dirty joke guy because I was like, I get it, I get it. But in that year, I spent a lot of time listening to other shows, how people interview, what you do, when to
Mhm.
do it. And the difference is with podcast, I'm going to say call it podcasting, right? The difference, this kind of open form conversation is that it's not great you've answered that question next question. It's a conversation, right? And how do you keep a
Yeah.
conversation going and lean into it and let it flow and kind of go where it wants to go? It's a beast into itself.
Yeah, one thing I always try to do, and I really believe in this when you're hosting and doing podcasts and shows and interviews, I would never have a set agenda of questions. I think I had that twice in 6 months. Because to me, if you have a set agenda, like you may hear something in the second answer and you want to run with it.
Exactly.
But if you just think I have to stick to this, I don't think you get the true, like, genuine, authentic type answers.
No.
And I always hated it. We'd have a few guests who would ask, "Can you send me questions ahead of time?" Or I'm like, "I guess I could," but I would rather imagine our interview being on the street,
Yeah.
you telling me an answer, and then I have a follow-up question because that's common sense that I want to know the next thing about what you just said.
Mm. And
And
it's
that's the way I like to do it.
so how do you, because I have real trouble with that, right? When people ask you that, they're like, great, send me through with talking points. And I was like, nah. I mean, I was just kind of thinking that we have a conversation. I find it so hard to reply to those messages and still sound professional because I'm like, no, no, no. This is the point of
Yeah.
the show: is to have a conversation with you, not hear the answers to questions which people have come up with 100 times and you've answered 100 times. And oh well, we started. Blah, 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 Oh, the thing
Mhm.
I hate most when you see a podcast is when you watch people slip into that story they've told 100 times.
Yeah,
And that story was
absolutely.
great 5 or 6 times in, but has lost its spark, has lost its, people are glossing over the interesting bits now. And you're like, ah,
Mhm.
come on, I've heard it all before. So
Do you
100.
have you ever heard of what we call coach speak in athletics? Coach speak, I
I
hate
have.
it. It's the worst. That's what I don't want it to be. No matter if the interview is about sports or just everyday stuff. Like, don't give me coach speak. That's not what I'm here for.
And for those of our listeners, give us an example of some coach speak.
I mean, so I grew up and went to Alabama, which
Mhm.
is a huge football university.
I
Won a
watch Last Chance You constantly, which is also a Netflix show, which is all set in the University of Alabama.
Yeah, yeah, that is right down the street,
Oh, really?
from there. So, yeah, it was like an hour or 2 away,
Wow.
from the university when they did season 1. They kinda jumped around, but
Yeah.
season 1 was right there beside it. So Nick Saban is basically the king of coach speak. He's the greatest coach of all time. You won't convince me otherwise. And they'll ask him about, well, what do you think about the opponent this week? Well, we really respect our opponent. They do a tremendous job of getting ready. They're very talented on both sides of the ball. They put in a lot of hard work. They play teams really aggressively. And, for our team to be successful, we're going to have to come out and play our A game. And I don't care what you guys think and that we may be favored over them. We've got to play our best game. Otherwise, we're going to get beat because they're very talented. Nobody wants to hear that.
So you've just covered all the bases. If you lose, you're cool. If you win, you're cool. Why say it? Why bother saying it?
Nobody wants to hear that. Yeah.
So, as we clearly don't have any questions here at the Daily Show pre-planned, you're a baseball guy, right? I'm a movie guy and love basically Americana. I very rarely watch anything to do with the UK. So, what's your favorite baseball film?
That's tough, man. There's so many
Field
good
of Dreams
ones.
because that's not a baseball film.
That's not my favorite, actually. There's a couple of different ways to go because you could have comedy or you could have drama on a lot of those. Because like Major League is maybe the best comedy for baseball ever, but I'm also partial to Kevin Costner and Bull Durham. And
great movie.
Love those two. But then I also love there's a movie I don't think it gets enough respect. It's called For Love of the Game. And it's Kevin Costner and Kelly Preston, who, God rest her soul. That was done like late 90s, early 2000s.
Sure, the same sort of time that he did Tin Cup, the golf movie as well.
Just a few years after that. Yeah. And Tin Cup's amazing, by the way.
Love that movie.
But yeah, so fantastic. For Love of the Game, though, is baseball like as its pure sport because he throws a perfect game.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some drama and life stuff that flash in and out of the movie, so it's not all baseball. But those would probably be my top three, I guess. But man, Tom Hanks in A League of Their Own.
Love that.
I don't know, man. You could just. I love all of them. I'm not as big on Field of Dreams and The Natural, though. I don't get as excited about those as other people do.
I used to love The Natural so much because my dad's a huge Robert Redford fan, so I've seen it an awful lot. And I tried to watch it recently, and before, spoilers. I know the movie's been out an awful long time, but something happens to the main guy. Before that even happens to him, I was like, snooze, and I'm out. And that was me done, which is a real shame. But we were talking recently, so baseball just isn't really a thing here in the UK. I'm sure there's some pockets of people who it's live and die for it. The NFL has come to the UK in a big bad way. It's something I've loved for a decade, but now it's more and more, and obviously there's games here and such as well. But we were saying in the office the other day, Moneyball with Brad Pitt. Okay, there's not a huge amount of baseball play in it, but I've watched that movie like 11 times, and I don't really know much, or it's not a sport that I'm into or know enough about to make sense of. And they lean mostly into the maths and statistics of it, and I watch it over and over. Just can't believe, and it's such an interesting story. The fact it is true and has changed the game in such a powerful way.
Well, I am Brad Pitt, not in looks, but I am that in superstition. So if my team is losing, I will walk away. I will change seats in the bonus room. I will change drinks, change cups. I will do anything to change momentum. And so he doesn't watch his team play, which is hilarious. And I never knew that until the movie. But yeah, it's funny because that changed baseball. And now people manage baseball by computers in a sense.
Sure.
The same thing is happening in other sports, though. People are looking at basketball, and there are teams that are now working on your launch angle in basketball, and your shooting and your rotation and your angles. And in football, they do the same thing. They measure different statistics that you wouldn't think of before. And so, everything now in sports is being managed by data rather than by feel.
Which is a shame, because one of the things I loved and really took away from Moneyball was how many scouts there are out there, where that is your job, just to find talent. Like you can, I know that crack of the bat that guy can hit. Like I just the way
Right.
he stands isn't right. I love that element to it, and obviously that movie is very based on the fact of like they knew nothing, and the statistics knew all, which is obviously
Yeah.
always true. But you don't want to get to that point where you lose the magic of finding someone in the rough who maybe doesn't have the stats to
Mhm.
progress that the computer won't put in, who can be the next insert name of great star here.
Yeah. I guess they look at it and say, we are going to miss the occasional diamond in the rough. And
Mm.
we're putting our money in the corner of the computer is going to lead us in the right
Sure.
direction more often than the wrong direction. But I agree with you. I don't know if you watched Tampa and Los Angeles play on Wednesday or
Mm.
Tuesday night. It was game 6 and the Dodgers won the World Series. There was a huge deal on Twitter and social media and
I
in the
saw that. I
sports
saw that
world.
everything back. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the Tampa manager, Kevin Cash, took out Blake Snell, who was dealing. He was 5 innings, scoreless ball, 75 pitches. He could have gone another 2 innings, maybe
Boom.
3. Took him out of the game, and the computer said that the next 3 batters, he should not see them a third time. Well, those 3 batters were 0 for 6 with 6 strikeouts for the night and
But the
still
computer
took
said
him
it,
out.
so you have to go with it. I tell you
Yeah,
what's interesting, just to vaguely pull it back from films and sport, because otherwise, I'll talk forever. But
I'm with you.
is the fact the same thing has kind of happened with marketing. 10, 15 years ago, it was about feel. There wasn't the reaction you could get from social media. There wasn't the statistics you could pull on every platform to see who likes it, when they liked it.
Mhm.
You mentioned that the idea of changing the show was that heart and feel, or was that you looking at statistics and getting feedback from the audience?
I think it was both. I think that we done a really good job in the number of comments and likes and shares and downloads on the
Mm,
podcast and
mm,
views on YouTube and just all these different things. We've done a great job, in my opinion, of growing the numbers in a short period of time.
sure.
But I don't expect this thing to blow up overnight.
Mm,
But I could feel, and this is where the feel comes in. I just didn't feel like the numbers were doing anything different after a certain point. I felt like it kind of started to flatline
yeah,
and that we weren't losing people that we had before. People would still tune in, people would still interact, but I
sure.
didn't feel like we were getting the next person.
Right.
And that's where I thought, okay, we've had some fun with it. It's been a good trial run. Now we need to actually focus in on what is our core message. So when people look at us, they go, that's what those guys do.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's one of those things. It's like, back to the feel. We've gone through at the end of 2019. We went through a similar sort of look at everything that we offer. Oh, just thought I'd slam the mic there just to be a
Yeah.
professional
Pissed
podcaster.
off at it
But
today.
yeah,
Yeah.
bam. Uh, but we looked at everything we offer and just started to say, you know, I can't explain what we do anymore. And I've
Mhm.
always worked with under a thing called Sandler Sales, very American sales technique, which I think is phenomenal, because it's the only one which kind of like pushes for equality. And it's that kind of, if I can't, and they have within Sandler, they have something called barbecue speak. So barbecue speak is kind of counterpoint to the elevator pitch. So instead of the
Okay.
elevator pitch, when I've got my 30 seconds stood with Richard Branson or Elon Musk, and I'm like, right, we do dun 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 dun, buy me. Instead, barbecue speak is when I'm flipping a burger, talking to my guys, and they're like, what do you do? And I'm like, man, it's like podcasting and stuff and thing, right? So we got to the point where we were looking at services and just saying, like, I don't necessarily have the barbecue speak for what we do anymore. Well, that suggests to me that it's all got a bit convoluted and stuff. And if I can't
Yeah.
put it into to a nice little package, then how can I market it? How can I put that
Right.
out to the world? And it's nice to have a scattergun approach and be like, we can help everyone. It's very hard to get in front of everyone's eyes, though.
There's a guy here in Nashville who he's actually my financial advisor, and he talks about explanation of services all the time. That's
Right?
his core, his what he calls his EOS, explanation of services. And exactly what you're saying is that if somebody walks up to you and you're at a dinner party or a cocktail party or a
Yeah.
wedding reception and you're just mingling and they say, what do you do? How are you going to reply in that 15-second window? And nobody ever knows. Like, you're just kinda like, I do mortgages. I host a podcast. It's like it's all very boring and very just vanilla.
Mm.
And so he tries to teach people how to come up with something 15, 20, 30 seconds that you can spit out quick that catches their attention
Mm.
because you really only have one shot. Otherwise, they're going to keep moving.
So often, and what I've found is that I used to have kind of my elevator pitch and my barbecue speak, right? I'd be able to, if I'm when
I
I'm
love
at
that you have barbecue speak, and I live in the South where we rave over barbecue. Like, that's
dude.
our thing, okay?
So I didn't have a.
Barbecue is us.
I'm trying to steal it, right? And I know that's a difficult thing to try and steal barbecue from the South, but I didn't have a garden for like 8 years. We lived in a flat and we didn't have a garden. In the last 2 years, after coming into 3 years now, we lived in a place with a big old garden. So I barbecued over 52 times in a year. It
Holy cow.
doesn't sound huge to you guys, but we don't have much summer. So
Yeah, okay.
I was
I get
cooking
it.
stuff in the rain and the snow, like it's
Yeah.
good, it's good. If I let this rest, it's going to get very cold.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, but I've always thought that if I shouldn't have, I used to. I used to have like, here's my corporate pitch. This is what we do. GL Pro, RA, blah, blah, blah. And then I'd have the other one for like a networking event where I could elongated. But it takes me back to thinking of my favorite Einstein quote. If you don't understand it, you can't explain it simply. I said it backwards, but his quote is, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it. And I hated getting to the point where I couldn't explain my own service. So it's really very interesting to see that you've been able to have, it's not like you were failing, right? It's not like you were doing it every day and you were seeing this trail off and being like, we have to stop. Actually having success at it and saying, but I'm going to put a full stop in there and we're going to relaunch for this bit which makes sense and that speaks to the audience. It's brave, it's bold, but it's also necessary a lot of the time.
It is, and I'm a little weird anyway because I have this attitude about winning because we've been fortunate enough, and I brag on the team all the time that we've been the number one branch at our company, Loan Depot, in 2019, and it looks like we're going to be able to defend that title in 2020.
Ooh.
And people ask all the time, they say, "Well, when's enough enough, or aren't you happy you won?" Because I'm always annoyed and pushing, and how can we get more? How can we do better? How can we get more efficient? And I tell them, I want there to be such a distinction between first and second that second is embarrassed to even be on the sheet with us. Like, I want them to go to whoever makes the sheet and beg to be taken off of the sheet because there's such a large gap that it's just stupid.
You want your own
And
weight class.
I do. I don't want to be number one. I want to be number 1 through 10. And then somebody else can be 11 is what I want.
I used to watch
So,
the Formula One motor racing when I was a
yeah.
kid, and for a long time, Michael Schumacher won everything. And after a
Mhm.
while, a couple of seasons of this, I stopped caring about number one, and I was looking for the race between number two. So you want to be? I like that. I like that. That's success, right?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I want that. Name anybody you got. I want to be Tiger Woods of our group. I want to be Babe Ruth. I want to be all those names in our industry where there's just a clear cut, defined. This is who we are.
Mm. So how do you? Because I have a very very similar mentality. I remember saying when we first started the company, I only expect unprecedented success. Right? But how do you keep people to continue to strive to do more? Like I know how we've tried to do it, and we've tried to build a culture around, being part of the business and want it to grow as well. But you King Dingaling last year going for going for 2 years. How do you continue to motivate your team when sometimes it's easier to be the underdog, to be chasing number one, right? It's easier to chase than it is
Mm.
to be there and hold the title. So how do you keep your team and keep everyone kind of on the ball with that?
It's hard. I've brought this up many times to different people who work in sales, different people who work on the psychology side. It's not easy. And I'm almost to the point where I ask myself, do some people, they either kind of have it inside to want to do more or they don't.
Mm,
And I don't know if you can force or teach ambition.
you can't.
You
I am positive you can't.
yeah, and so that becomes like if somebody their whole life dreams of making in America $200,000, which I'm
Hmm.
sorry, I don't have the currency converter for you, but if it's just $200,000 in American money, then uh, am I going to be able to push them to make 300?
Yeah.
If that may never happen in our world. And
Uh-huh.
so really what I think it comes down to is we just continue to grow, and that
Mm.
helps expand the team. And growth also creates a little bit of peer pressure, because if somebody's happy at 200
Yeah.
and we hire two or three people and they come in and do 300,
Damn.
that person a little bit feels like, oh, i'm i'm uh, I'm one upped all of a sudden.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And
yeah. I was the top of the crop last time with my 200. Now I'm like, what? Like,
yeah, so I think that's part of it. I also think me as a leader I have to set examples
okay.
and constantly show them I'm not happy. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to keep going. So you're welcome to stay on the bus,
Mm.
because we're still going to keep going. And if you don't want to, that's fine. Just understand that,
This is what we're
this is
doing.
where we're headed. Yeah,
and
this is
and
where
and
we're
it's
headed.
what
It's
you
what we
signed
do.
up for. And I honestly agree with that. As long as you are upfront and honest about that from day one, you're not moving the
Mhm.
goalposts, as we say in the UK. But you're not changing the rules that you set out originally. But if people
Yeah.
understand that from day one, 2 years down the line, they can't be like, oh, it seems like it's still going. I'm like, and it's going to keep going, and it's going to keep going. What is quite nice, I've found, is when you have that growth and it's year on year, it becomes a bit of a case of when the going gets tough.
Yeah.
And if people don't want to be on that train with you and they don't want to carry on that journey with you, they will naturally leave,
Mhm.
because it's too much, which means you ending up with a core group of people, or however many people, who are all on the same train, and that kind of is self-perpetuating, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I'm real big on transparency as
Hmm.
well. That's how I've always done. I hate managers who feed me lines of BS, or have told me just things you want to hear,
Uh-huh.
or who just say things are going to be okay, or they sell you a line of BS because they're trying to sell you on why something that's bad is okay. Like, no, it's actually okay if something is bad. We should go to work and think nothing bad will ever happen. Like, corporate will make decisions you don't like, and you have to get real with that. Corporate doesn't call you to ask your opinion before they release a policy. So I just have always struggled with people who do it that way. Like,
Mm.
why try to sell me on why this is okay? It's okay to just say, hey, this sucks, but
This is
it's
how we're going to get
corporate.
through
So
it. Yeah,
this is what we
exactly.
got to do. And yeah, and here's what we're going to do to work through it. So
Yeah.
let's
and it,
let's move on.
and it always has to be that case as well. There's constant issues, no matter what your business is, no matter what you solve. There's just
Exactly.
constant problems that get thrown up. If you can't roll with the punches a little bit, I don't know. Don't know what to tell you, because you're going to go into, even if you leave and do a completely new industry, there's going to be problems there you need to solve as well. It's
Yeah.
unfortunately, it is the nature of all things.
It absolutely is, and it's just a big pet peeve of mine, man. I could go on forever about that one. That's a soapbox topic, but yeah, it just drives me nuts. And I've always said it, good news or bad news, and I don't know who originally said the quote, but I've heard it a few times in the industry. Deliver, whether it's a customer or your team, good news fast, bad news faster, and just be real with everybody and say this is it. If they quit over one piece of bad news, they were quitting anyway.
Yes.
If they don't work with you over one bad thing you have to say, they were never yours to begin with.
No, or it wasn't the right thing for them, because this is
Right.
going to happen constantly, and that's not a nice environment. If you can't handle that, then it's time to hit the bricks and find something where you're more comfortable in. And
And that's okay.
that is absolutely fine. And we've found that
That's
as
okay.
we've grown, we've become something which isn't the right fit anymore. And people have been here for many years. All of a sudden, it's like, that's not. Oh God, that's too much for me now. That's okay. We're going to carry on going in this direction, but there's no love loss. Like, it's not like we hate each other now or anything like that. I get it. Thank you for everything. Like, I'll see you on the road, and find something that makes you happy. It sounds so cliche, and it's so like, find something that makes you happy. But there's actually, it's like you were saying earlier, right? We're not 15 years ago where we're looking, desperately trying to find one DVD. So there's some footage on a netball game where we can then, learn to commentate. I can find anything now. Like if I'm
Mhm.
into fishing, I can find a job in fishing. If I'm into this, I'm into that. If I'm into art, if I'm into finance, like there, I can find not only the industry that has roles for me, but the right type of role that I want, and then find all of those roles as well. So there is an opportunity now for everyone to pursue happiness essentially, which is a great thing,
Yeah.
because I think beforehand it was an idea, whereas now it's a kind of, is actually an ability people have.
I really don't think people have ever had more opportunity than they do
Mm,
today. With social media and these types of things right here, like what you said, somebody could have a passion for fishing. There's nothing that stops them from opening up their computer and doing a fishing show once a
yep,
week
easy.
in their spare time.
Yep.
Eh, 2 seconds, you're ready to roll.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's so many more opportunities, in my opinion, today because of the technology, and like what you said, sometimes I'm almost doing someone a favor if they don't if they need to leave. It's no hard feelings, it's okay, and I think
Exactly.
people get too offended by it, and it's like, "No, it's fine, just it's okay.
Yeah.
Find something you do wanna do."
And it's been overused, especially in far too many Die Hard movies or whatever movies. But it's just business. It's not personal. But that really is a thing. That really is a thing. And being able to separate the I, the me, the personal away from the job is something a lot of people find it hard. Is the decompartmentalization isn't an easy thing to do. But when you can do it, you can actually switch off and say, okay, well, Chad's making that decision as my boss about that, but Chad's still the guy that I have coffee with. Chad's still that person. And I think it's something which you learn very, very quickly, or have to learn very, very quickly when you become a business owner, but not something you necessarily ever have to learn as an employee. And you're always sat there being like, oh, they hate me. No, they probably go home and hate their decision, just like the rest of us as a person, but as a business, they had to do it. Um, so you were talking earlier about the education and the fact that in the US, much like the UK, no one teaches you to get a mortgage. No one teaches you how you're going to pay off your student loans. How is the rebrand, the new focus of what you're doing, going to kind of help with that?
We're really going to just get laser focused and target and make the message very clear on what we're trying to do and who we're trying to help. So this is going to be for, I mean, kids really who are in middle school, high school, college. And that's not easy because when I was in high school, I didn't want somebody lecturing me over this crap. So, yeah, that's going to be hard. But then you also have to, yeah, you have to get the parents. Like, it's not just the kids. So a
Mm,
lot of times it's the parents' age bracket that we would be targeting or looking towards, and even young adults because they get out of college. You shouldn't think, "Wow, I'm 5 years removed from college. I'm too late to this material." Like,
sure.
no, you should learn now. It's never too late. But it drives me nuts, and we talked about it before the show that you go to middle school, high school, college. People teach you how to do keg stands. People teach you how to do logarithms. People teach you how to heat up a beaker. People teach you about the biology of the human body.
I haven't even
And
seen a beaker since I
yeah,
left high school. I haven't seen one, like not one.
I don't know if I said the word. And people don't get taught how to file their income taxes. You literally think about that for a second. The federal government can come after you and put a lien on you personally and charge you taxes and
My
send you
God.
through an audit and fines and penalties. I don't know how the UK is. This is in America. And nobody ever told you how, but they taught you how to use a beaker.
Yeah.
And to me, that's just completely asinine. I've called it, like I've just said, it's a society fundamental flaw that we don't teach anybody these things: how to buy a house,
Yeah.
how to buy a car. When my dad, I was lucky enough that he got me a car when I was
Yeah.
in high school. And when he did that, I'm like, my dad just went and wrote a check for $10,000. It's like, no, he did a payment plan, but I
Yeah.
had no idea how that worked.
You
I
wouldn't
had
know
no
that, right?
idea.
Guess
Yeah,
he's got a briefcase full of £10,000,
yeah,
$10,000
exactly.
somewhere, right?
Yeah. Uh, So you don't learn that stuff. I used the analogy the other day that we will lay on an operating table and let a doctor slice our chest open, break our ribs, and operate on our heart. That doctor may not know how a mortgage works. Explain that to me. It's crazy.
Oh my God,
How do
that's
you
so
not
true.
know? It is. It's so true. And it's a problem. People don't know how credit works. They don't know how compound interest works. They don't know how to get their score up. They don't know how 30-day elites work. They don't know how to invest for their future. They know nothing.
And jump back 20 years ago, that's what caused the recession, right? It was tons of people being like, well, if I can get it, I'll take it. Yay. And not
Oh, the
realizing that
American
kind of,
dream is debt. It's not home ownership. The American dream is debt. Like, I want it right now. I
yeah,
want everything. I want the house I can't afford. Oh, I don't
big
have to pay
screen
it back.
TV, bunch of
Yeah,
burgers in my 4-car drive with my
yeah.
two barbecues outside, one smoker, one the other, because you got to keep
Yeah.
it real. No, exactly. And that's the thing is, and I have to admit, as a salesperson in the UK, so the UK is slightly different because we don't have to file our own taxes until we're self-employed.
Okay.
So the company we work for pays tax and such kind of for us. And there is an element of having to do some bits yourself, but a lot of it is kind of taken care of. So I didn't really know anything about that until we started this company and then had this like learning curve, schwang, because now I'm not only responsible for myself, but like everybody else. Well, what really? What is tax? What is this? We pay national insurance, so we have private or public health care. All these bits are just kind of coming into it. I'm like, well, okay, I don't know what these things are, and you're having to learn it. Like that is pertinent information, and I don't know if you have to do a master's in business or go back to school and do this to find that out. But it feels like something that someone at some point should have said, hey, you're learning French for an hour a week. Never going to use it. How about we just talk
I've been
about
to
a couple
Paris once.
of yeah,
I
right. So have I.
Great.
And it's across
Yeah.
the pot, it's across a
Yeah, you're a
small bit
lot
of
closer.
water,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And when I went there, guess what? I didn't say bonjour or thank you or whatever I said hi, how are you? And they said, oh, English, great. And they treated
Yeah.
me badly for it, but they knew what I was saying. That's it. I totally agree with you. It's amazing that we kind of expect people to be like, okay, cool. You're 18 in the UK, you can now drink. You're 21 in the UK, in the US, you can now drink and gamble. Cool, you're an adult. Go. Really? Because 25 minutes ago I was still a teenager, but today I can
Man.
do all these things and I'm left on my own.
Jay, I'm stealing that. I'm stealing that. Wait a minute. So I never even thought about it. So in America now, at 18, you can vote for the
Yeah,
president,
that's right.
but you can't file taxes and you can't get a mortgage because you don't know how. But we're going to let you decide who's going to make the policies for all these things
It's
that you
going to
can't
filter down.
do. And then and then at 21, you're allowed to go get hammered legally at a pub or a
Sorry
bar.
about the last 3 years. You can now go and have a drink and let
Yeah.
off some steam.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. Yeah, when you put it in that perspective as well. Oh, that's nuts.
Unfortunately, as well, we live in, but thankfully, there's some people like yourself out there going out and trying to educate some of the younger audience. Chad,
Right
as
on.
we said beforehand, we try and keep this a little bit short because people are on LinkedIn and, hopefully they try and do some work as well while listening to you and I yakety yak. So when people want to come and find you, and you should, if you're listening to this and you've enjoyed what Chad said, check out Beyond Alone. It's really cool. Like I was so honored to be a guest on the show. It's a really, really good show. And as we've heard, there's a wealth of back content to go through as well. So
Yeah,
if people want to
there's
find you, Chad, where do they go to find you?
so the best is probably just our website is beyondthelone.com. Very simple. And then it will lead you to all our social media. We're everywhere: Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, you name it. And then we've got our podcasts on Apple and Spotify. So appreciate it. And we love interacting and engaging too. So if you drop us a line, have a question, something of that sort, we're happy to reply, talk to you, answer questions, etc. We're not going to ignore you by any means.
Amazing. Chad, as always, it's an absolute pleasure talking with you. I really, really appreciate it. And for everyone listening out there, that was the Jaily Show. Thanks very much.